Hey y'all, welcome back to We Should Do This More Often. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Ashley, and in today's episode, we're talking about the chameleon effect.
So, why some of us become masters at reading the room? That's kind of what we're going to discuss today, and how that skill was born out of a survival instinct.
Yeah, we're unpacking childhood drama, emotional whiplash, and people pleasing, and how God can help us trade it all for real discernment. All right, well, before we get started on the chameleon effect, we probably need to define it. Because I know there's probably a lot of people out there that have never heard of that. They may know the concept, but they're not exactly sure what we're talking about. So I'll tell you all what Google says it is. It says it's the tendency to mirror or mimic others' behavior, tone, or energy unconsciously as a way to gain acceptance or to avoid conflict.
And so when we look at a lot of the research that comes around the chameleon effect, and a lot of research didn't come out until after 1990, realizing that it was kind of a trauma response in a way. But the chameleon effect, it is just a natural social event. Like, when you're in a crowd, you do naturally, without meaning to, that's why it's not fake, you start to mimic others' behaviors. Because, for instance, if someone comes in and they're huffing and puffing and acting like a bull in a china shop, you immediately start to mimic that defense. Like, oh, this is unsafe. And that's just a natural response. So, Lakin's research found that mimicry is a social signal that enhances interpersonal closeness and trust. So a lot of us want to build those interpersonal connections that we have with others, through empathy, through mimicking that chameleon effect. But it also, and it's a tool for inclusion. To be accepted by others is to mimic that behavior. But there are some negative aspects too. So like Ashley said, some of us can have learned to read a room, read others' intentions and behaviors, and learn to mimic and almost have that a chameleon effect when having conversations with certain people or in a certain environment, so that it is a way to stay safe. So do we want to talk a little bit about that, Ashley?
Sure. We have gone over an overview of our personal stories to this point. So if you have not heard those, please go back and listen. Andrea and I both have an episode where we go sort of an overview of our childhood all the way up until now, what got us here. But Andrea and I have both been in homes where you had to read the emotional temperature really in order to know how to act or respond. Growing up in a household that had alcohol abuse and minor drug abuse, I would never know if, number one, if he was intoxicated, and number two, what mood he would be in when he was intoxicated. So I think for me at least, and I'll let Andrea speak to her, it sort of heightened this skill. And I do call it a skill set because I think it is subconscious, but I think that some people are much better at it than others. Like, I can read rooms, and that has been a joke. And Andrea is the same, but a lot of our friends, I think separately and together, have looked at us and said, "How did you figure that out?" And because we feel it, and there's not really, I don't. It's very hard to explain. I have been able to look at people and go, "What's wrong with you? What's bothering you?" When no one else, there's no physical warnings or no physical signs of something going on with them, but it's that energy that we spoke to earlier. It's that tension sort of that you start to feel that feels familiar. So you can look at someone and go, something's not right with them. What's going on? And a lot of people, we're going to use this word, I think a lot probably in this podcast, would call it discernment. And I think that that's really, when it comes down to it, the godly version of what we're talking about here, if you want to call that the spiritual version of it. But the things throughout our lives really have helped that spiritual gift evolve and blossom into what it is for both of us today.
And it's really funny because Ashley and I have both talked about this before in the past. A lot of people, when they first meet us, think that we're quiet. And then we are like, totally not. And then later they're like, oh, wow, you're like really an extrovert. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of like an introvert extrovert, because at first you're collecting data, right?
Constantly
reading. You're analyzing and you're collecting data. So there's that period of quietness and stillness because you're trying to collect data on others. It has been known by coworkers of mine that, I can go around a room and give you mannerisms and act out exactly another person's mannerisms because it's something that I just immediately notice, like someone's hands that shake, or someone who does this, or someone whose mouth is moving when another person is talking. It's the weirdest thing, but it is. I love that word that you used, checking the emotional temperature of the room and feeling someone else's energy. And I bet there's a lot of people listening today who also feel that way or have experienced that. And I love that she connected it to discernment, because the Bible does hit on that. We do have this awareness. And why do we have this awareness? It's really a skill set that's gifted from God to help us know when others are hurting. I had the same situation at a birthday party, Ashley, that happened just the other day. I was sitting and I could tell there was something wrong with one of the moms. I could just tell. And so when she sat down, I just asked her, I said, what's wrong? And she goes, oh, how do you? And I said, I can tell. Like, I know something's wrong. And it opened up a beautiful conversation for us to have. But I think it's just a natural skill that you develop, just trying to learn how to read the room, see if it's safe, and learning how to match the energy that's in that room.
Well, and I'll speak to this too. I am someone that laughs a lot, but I laugh at things that not necessarily everyone else might laugh at. And as we were preparing for this podcast, and just so you guys know, we don't do a lot of preparation together. We sort of prepare separately and then come together and smush it all together and say, okay, this is what we want to talk about. This is what we want to say. And normally it's pretty spot on together. I have been questioned many a times about why I laugh so much, why stuff is so funny. And as I was working through this, I thought, this might actually play a part in why I will just start laughing, because I will see someone do something that I know they were uncomfortable doing or something, and it will make me chuckle, not in a mean way, but like I've had it happen in choir practice recently. One of my friends in church that I'm getting to know better, she looked over at me, I just started laughing because of a look that on somebody's face, and she was like, why are you laughing? And I'm like, I can't explain it, and I'm really sorry, but it was super funny if you caught it. So great.
Snort.
I do snort when I laugh, guys. Sorry.
But it would come out.
It's just one of those things. Like Andrea said, mimicry really does build connection. What we're talking about, this chameleon effect, and it takes a lot of emotional intelligence. You're talking about reading not only energies, but a lot of people, it has to do with reading body language, and really looking at situations holistically, and also very narrow at the same time. It's like the big version and then the zoomed in version, because you have to look at how people are interacting with each other, how they're interacting with themselves. It's so hard to explain, but it's a real living, breathing thing. And the people that are listening, you all may have never had a label to put on that. Like I think for a long time, Andrea is the one that told me what it was called. I didn't know what it was called. I just thought, well, I'm intuitive. I'm like, I'm discerning.
And I was like, no, girl, we're chameleons. Let me go ahead and tell you about this disorder.
and the social aspect of it is literally, and there are negative things to it, because what I think builds it is mostly negative, and you shouldn't ever blend in. I want to make that clear. We're not talking necessarily, Andrea and I aren't, at least, about blending in a negative way, but think of how much ministry there is when you are able to fit in with different crowds. And I think it even goes back to like what we said previously in another episode about our friendship, how we have just never been someone that was a part of big friend groups, that we just sort of bounce around to all these different places and fit in seamlessly because we know how to act. Like, I can sit with a group of people that make millions of dollars, and I have before, and not felt like I am at least standing out and them going, oh, well, she, look at her. But I have also gone around some of the most ratchet people you will ever meet and fit in just fine with them too. And I think my mentor said it to me at one time. She said, you're an observer, and you can fit in with any crowd. You can bounce around from different diverse ethnic groups. You can go over here to different sexual orientational groups.
Socioeconomics,
we're talking diversity. And think about how useful that is when especially in my take on it, the way I look at it is just from a ministry aspect of just simply being able to connect with people and them being willing to listen or hear you out. I think it's huge.
And I love that you're hitting on the positive aspects of it, because that's the reason we're even bringing this up, is so that, a lot of people don't talk. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to go into a friend group and just be like, hey, I think I have a chameleon effect. I don't really think I blend in. I'm just like, I feel like I'm just faking it with y'all. Like, I mean, no one's going to go. So this is kind of a conversation to really, as an inclusion piece of other people probably feel this way too. And there's some negative aspects of it as well, because like Ashley said, I can blend in anywhere. And that opens up this ministry to all. And in my mind, I think that Jesus had this effect as well, because I think that he was able to have discernment, but he was also able to blend in and have those, to, have that kind of that social inclusiveness around him. So that's kind of why we wanted to bring this topic up. Now, there are some negative aspects of this as well. And Ashley, I keep thinking of the last podcast that we did, because Ashley, when I was doing my story, she cried the whole time. And the reason is because of that empathetic piece, right? And I even told her, I was like, is something wrong with me? Like, why am I not crying? But it's that you can feel another person's energy. And so, and Ashley and I have talked about this a lot. Like, if I get really mad and I'm trying not to punch someone in the face, I start crying.
Same.
And then I feel like I look weak, but really I'm trying not to punch a sister in the face. Like, that's what's happening.
Or a brother,
Yeah, or brother. But it's one of those things where it also, having the chameleon effect can be hard sometimes, because you can feel the energy, and it is hard to not absorb that energy, especially if it is a very emotionally tense conversation. And even though you have this high emotional intelligence, you can tell the energy, you can read the room. If the energy is at a certain level or tone, it becomes hard to ignore, and then you start absorbing that energy. And I think that's something that is a negative aspect in some way because, I've had friends that have literally sucked me dry
Yes.
emotionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to the point where I've had to end friendships and say, I need to take a break from this because this is consuming so much of my emotions and my emotional energy that I am unable to pour in anyone else's cup because I am literally depleted. So there's the positives, but then there's also some.
But it's not about changing who you are. It's about pulling from inside out different parts of who you are. So maybe in the more ratchet friend group, I'm loud and rowdy, and I get everybody pumped up. But in the other group, I am quieter. I am more subdued. I'm more laid back. Both entirely me, entirely me. But depending on where you are, who you're with, that situation can change. And I've seen too many people that get into a situation where they do not know how to navigate those things. People in that I've worked with, like in professional settings, not know how to keep their mouth closed. And they want to say, well, it's just me being me, but what part of you? Do you know what I mean? You can't go in places where there's a standard way of acting and being and cause a scene in these places because you're just being who you need to be. We are all multifaceted individuals. We all have different moods, different ways of being. So don't let that be the case.
And I think it's powerful. And that's kind of why we brought the whole conversation around. Because I did have a friend who she's very empathetic. She's very much displays a lot of the chameleon effect aspects in her behaviors, but she looks at it as a flaw because she gets labeled emotional or irrational, and it's not you're emotional, you're irrational. It's the situation, and it makes me, at least, and I know it does you as well, it makes me more aware and very strategic with the people that I choose to have in my life. Such a good conversation today. Ashley, do you want to take us end our podcast today with some scripture? Because I feel like we've been setting it up for this.
So Jeremiah 18:3-4 says, so I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working a wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed to best him. So the potter's creation was flawed. But the potter, and we all know who the potter is, Jesus, he can reshape that flawed form into something that he sees is beautiful. And his is the only opinion that really matters. So that trauma that Andrea and I went through, all the different things that you have gone through in your life, God is able to shape those things. And it might not look beautiful to anyone else when they see the marred version, but once God gets his hands on it, it will turn into something of a masterpiece. Until next time, we should do this more often.
We definitely should.
All right.
See you all next time. Bye.